Marcus Chen had been delivering food for 3 years. At 26, his dreams of becoming an architect had been put on hold when his younger sister Emma was diagnosed with leukemia. Every penny he earned went toward her treatment. Every delivery was a step closer to keeping her alive. That Thursday evening, exhaustion weighed on his shoulders like a heavy coat. He had been working for 14 hours straight, his motorcycle cutting through the rain-soaked streets with mechanical precision. The last delivery of the day was to one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, a place where houses cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Marcus parked his bike in front of an imposing mansion and checked the order: lobster thermidor, truffle pasta, and vintage wine. The bill came to $347. He shook his head, thinking about how that amount could feed his sister for 2 weeks. As he walked up the marble steps, his stomach growled loudly. He had only eaten a granola bar that morning, saving the rest of his money for Emma's medication. In his delivery bag, alongside the expensive meal, was a small sandwich, white bread with peanut butter, his only planned meal for the day. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, dripping with diamonds and disdain. "You're late," she said coldly, not even looking at Marcus directly. "I'm sorry, Mom. The traffic was—" "I don't want excuses. Here's your tip." She handed him a $5 bill with the air of someone doing a great favor. Marcus wanted to say that $5 was insulting for a $347 order delivered in a storm, but he simply smiled and said, "Thank you, have a good evening." He had learned long ago that pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. After completing his delivery, Marcus was heading back to his apartment when he saw something that made him stop. Under the awning of a closed bank, a man in an expensive suit sat on the ground, his head buried in his hands, shoulders shaking with what appeared to be uncontrollable sobs. The scene was surreal. The man's clothes were clearly designer. Italian leather shoes, a watch that probably cost more than Marcus earned in 6 months. A perfectly tailored suit that even soaked by rain still looked elegant. But there he was, crying like a lost child in the middle of the street. Marcus hesitated. He had seen many things in his years as a delivery driver, but this was different. Something about the man's desperation touched a chord in his heart. He parked his motorcycle and approached slowly. "Sir, are you okay?" The man looked up, and Marcus was surprised to see he was relatively young, maybe in his early 40s, with gray-streaked hair and eyes red from crying. What struck Marcus most was the genuine pain in his expression. This wasn't just sadness, it was anguish. The man began, then stopped, as if realizing how strange the situation must seem. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here like this." "Hey, no judgment here," Marcus said, crouching down to the man's level. "We all have bad days." The man let out a bitter laugh. "Bad day? That's an understatement." He looked at Marcus more carefully, noticing the delivery uniform and helmet. "You're working in this storm?" "Yeah, well, bills don't pay themselves," Marcus replied with a tired smile. There was something in the young delivery driver's tone, not self-pity but simple acceptance of reality, that made the man's eyes fill with fresh tears. "You want to talk about what happened?" Marcus offered, sitting on the ground next to him, despite the rain starting to soak through his clothes. The man was silent for a long moment, staring at the rain falling on the empty street. Finally, he spoke. "My name is William Harrison, and today I lost everything." Marcus recognized the name immediately. William Harrison was one of the most prominent businessmen in the city, owner of a tech empire worth billions. His face appeared regularly on magazine covers and business news. "What do you mean, everything?" Marcus asked. William laughed bitterly. "I mean everything. My company, my money, my reputation, my family. Everything I built in 20 years gone in one day." He began to tell his story. How a business partner he trusted like a brother had been embezzling money for years. How federal investigations had frozen all his assets. How his wife had left that morning with their children, saying she couldn't handle the scandal. "The worst part," William continued, his voice breaking, "is that I never saw it coming. David was my best friend since college. I trusted him completely, and while I was focused on innovation, on building something meaningful. He was stealing millions. Marcus listened in silence, understanding that sometimes people just need someone to hear their pain. Now the FBI thinks I was involved. My accounts are frozen, my assets seized. I can't even access the money to pay my lawyers. William looked at his expensive watch ironically. This watch? It's probably worth more than I can access right now, and I can't sell it because technically it's evidence in the investigation. What about your family? William's face contorted with pain. Sarah took the kids to her parents' house in California. She said she needed time to think, but I know what that means. 20 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and she couldn't handle standing by my side when things got difficult. The rain continued to fall, and Marcus noticed William was shivering. Without thinking, he took off his waterproof jacket and offered it to the older man. I can't accept this, William protested. You'll get soaked. I'm used to working in the rain, Marcus insisted, helping him put on the jacket. Besides, you need it more than I do right now. The simple gesture of kindness seemed to break something inside William. He began crying again, but this time it was different. There was gratitude mixed with the pain. I haven't eaten anything today, William admitted. I went to 3 different restaurants, but my credit cards were all blocked. I have maybe $20 in cash in my wallet, and that's all the money I can access in the world right now. Marcus felt his heart clench. He knew what hunger was, had felt it many times, but the idea of someone going from infinite wealth to not being able to buy a meal in a single day seemed particularly cruel. Without hesitation, he reached into his delivery bag and pulled out his small sandwich. Here, he said, offering it to William. William looked at the simple sandwich, white bread, peanut butter wrapped in a paper napkin, and shook his head. I can't take your food. When was the last time you ate? Marcus asked. Yesterday morning, William admitted. Then you need this more than I do. Marcus placed the sandwich in William's hands. I can grab something later. But Marcus knew he was lying. That sandwich was all he had planned to eat until the next morning, when he hoped to have earned enough for another meal. His sister's medication had taken the last of his savings. William stared at the sandwich as if it were made of gold. I don't understand. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why are you helping me? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that to him seemed so natural. A few years ago, my little sister got sick. Really sick. Cancer. I was working 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough for her treatment. I was desperate, didn't know what to do. He paused, remembering that difficult time. One day, I was sitting outside the hospital crying like you are now. This old man, a janitor, came up to me and gave me his lunch. Said he'd seen me there for weeks and that someone who cared so much about family deserved help. William listened intently, unwrapping the sandwich with trembling hands. That sandwich didn't just feed my body, Marcus continued. It reminded me that there are still good people in the world. That kindness exists even in the darkest moments. That old man probably saved my life that day, not with money, but with hope. What happened to your sister? William asked softly. She's in remission now. The treatment worked. But every day is a new battle, you know. Every dollar I earn goes toward keeping her healthy and alive. William took a bite of the sandwich, and Marcus could see tears streaming down his face. This is the most delicious thing I've ever eaten, he said, his voice choked with emotion. The 2 men sat in comfortable silence for a while, sharing the small space under the bank's awning while the storm raged around them. William ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a gourmet meal. You know what's funny? William said after finishing the sandwich. I've eaten at the finest restaurants in the world. I've had meals that cost more than most people earn in a month. But this simple sandwich? It means more to me than all of those combined. Marcus smiled. Food always tastes better when it comes from the heart. Marcus, William said, having learned the young man's name during their conversation, I need to tell you something. What you did tonight, I'll never forget it. Anyone would have done the same. No, William said firmly. They wouldn't. I've lived in a world where people only help when they want something in return, where relationships are transactions and kindness is a currency. But you gave me your only food without knowing who I am, without expecting anything back. He pulled a business card from his wallet, one of the few things that wasn't frozen, and wrote something on the back. I want you to have this. When all this legal mess gets sorted out, when I get my life back, I want to do something for you. For your sister. Marcus looked at the card. It simply had William's name and a phone number written in shaky handwriting. Sir, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. You gave me more than food tonight. You gave me hope that there are still good people in this world. You reminded me of what really matters. William stood up, still wearing Marcus's jacket. I should go. I have a lawyer meeting early tomorrow, and I need to find somewhere to sleep. Where will you go? Marcus asked, concerned. William laughed bitterly. I honestly don't know. Hotels want credit cards, which I can't use. I have about $15 left. Maybe I'll find a motel somewhere. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. Look, I know this might sound crazy, but I have a small apartment. It's not much, but it has a couch. You're welcome to stay tonight if you want. William stared at him in amazement. You would do that? For a stranger? You're not a stranger anymore, Marcus replied simply. You're someone who needed help, and I happen to be in a position to give it. Marcus's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a delivery driver, saving every penny for his sister's medical bills. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, furniture that had seen better days. But it was clean, warm, and filled with love, evident in the photos of him and Emma scattered throughout the space. Emma's at the hospital tonight, Marcus explained, noticing William looking at the photos. She has to stay for monitoring after her chemotherapy sessions. William picked up a photo of Marcus and a beautiful young woman with a bald head but a radiant smile. She's beautiful. How old is she? 23. She was in her second year of law school when we found out about the cancer. Had to drop out, of course. And you've been taking care of her alone? Our parents died in a car accident when I was 18 and she was 15. It's been just us since then. William felt another wave of shame wash over him. Here was a young man who had faced more hardship than most people endure in a lifetime, yet he had offered food and shelter to a complete stranger without hesitation. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. Aren't you angry? At the world, at the situation, at the unfairness of it all? Marcus thought for a moment while preparing coffee with the small amount he had left. I was, for a while. When Emma got sick, when I had to give up architecture school, when I realized how expensive treatment was, I was furious. He handed William a steaming cup. But anger is exhausting, and it doesn't change anything. So I decided to focus on what I could control, working hard, being there for Emma, and trying to find reasons to be grateful even in difficult times. Grateful? William asked incredulously. For what? For having a sister worth fighting for. For living in a time when her type of cancer is treatable. For having health and strength to work. For meeting people like you tonight who remind me that pain is universal, but so is the capacity for kindness. William had to set down his coffee cup because his hands were shaking. How do you do it? How do you maintain such faith in humanity? Because if I don't believe in the goodness of people, what's the point of anything? And besides, Marcus smiled, every day I see proof. The doctor who stays late to check on Emma even though his shift ended. The elderly woman who always tips me extra because she says I remind her of her grandson. The millionaire who sits on the ground crying because he's more human than he thought. That night, William couldn't sleep. He lay on Marcus's couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. When he finally dozed off, he had dreams about his children, about the empire he'd built and lost, about the simple sandwich that had saved his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. He woke to the smell of coffee and found Marcus preparing for another day of deliveries. I have to leave early, Marcus explained. Want to visit Emma before starting work. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. I can't keep imposing. It's not an imposition. Besides, you might need a few days to sort things out. After Marcus left, William found himself alone with his thoughts. He looked around the simple apartment and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Despite having lost everything that society deemed important, he felt more centered than he had in decades. His phone rang. His lawyer. William, I have news. The FBI found evidence that clears you of any wrongdoing. David kept detailed records of his embezzlement, probably for leverage. The case against you is being dropped. William felt relief wash over him, but it was different from what he expected. What about my assets? They'll be unfrozen within 48 hours. Your company stock, your accounts, everything. You're about to get your life back. But as William hung up, he realized something profound. He wasn't sure he wanted his old life back. The life he'd been living, focused solely on wealth and status, seemed hollow compared to what he'd experienced in the past 24 hours. When Marcus returned that evening, he found William sitting at the small kitchen table, looking thoughtful. "How's Emma?" William asked. "Good days and bad days," Marcus replied, hanging up his delivery jacket. "Today was a good day. She was asking about the sad man I helped yesterday. I told her about you." "What did she say?" Marcus smiled. "She said I did the right thing, and that when someone helps us when we have nothing to offer in return, that's when we know they have a pure heart." William felt tears forming again. She sounds wise beyond her years. Cancer does that to people, forces you to focus on what really matters. "Marcus, I want to meet her." The next day, William accompanied Marcus to the hospital. He had bought new clothes with the small amount of cash he had, wanting to look presentable for Emma. When they entered the oncology ward, William was struck by the atmosphere. Despite being a place associated with illness, there was an undeniable sense of hope and love in the air. Nurses smiled genuinely, families supported each other, and patients fought their battles with grace and dignity. Emma was in room 314, and when William saw her, he understood immediately why Marcus would give up everything for her. Despite being bald from chemotherapy and thin from treatment, she radiated a light that was impossible to ignore. "So you're the famous William," she said with a teasing smile. "Marcus told me you make excellent company for crying sessions." William laughed, surprised by her humor. "Your brother saved my life, Emma. I hope you know how special he is." "I do. He's been my hero since I was 15. She looked at Marcus with pure love, but he's too humble to admit it. As they talked, William learned more about their story. How Marcus had dropped out of architecture school without hesitation when Emma got sick. How he worked multiple jobs to pay for treatment. How he never complained, never showed self-pity. "Can I ask you something, William?" Emma said during a quiet moment. "Of course. What do you do?" Marcus said you're in business, but he was pretty vague. William exchanged a look with Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. I was the CEO of a technology company. A big one. It's a long story, but I recently lost everything. Your brother found me at my lowest point." Emma studied his face carefully. "And now I'm trying to figure out who I really am without all the money and power." Over the next few days, William's assets were gradually unfrozen. His lawyer called with updates, accounts accessible, company shares available, properties released. In a matter of hours, he went from having $20 to being worth billions again. But something had changed. The numbers on his bank statements felt abstract, unreal. What felt real was the cup of coffee Marcus made each morning, the simple conversations they shared, the way Emma lit up when they visited her. When Marcus came home from work that Friday, he found William cooking dinner. "I hope you don't mind," William said, stirring a pot of pasta. "I wanted to contribute somehow. I went grocery shopping today." Marcus looked around the kitchen, which was now filled with high-quality ingredients, fresh vegetables, and expensive wine. "William, this must have cost a fortune. Money I can spend again now that my accounts are unfrozen." William's expression grew serious. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something." They sat down to dinner, and William began to speak. "My assets have been released. Legally, I'm a billionaire again. But these past few days with you and Emma have shown me something I'd forgotten. Wealth without purpose is meaningless." Marcus listened carefully, unsure where the conversation was heading. "I want to do something. Not just give you money, though I want to do that too, but something bigger. I want to create a foundation for families like yours who are fighting cancer but can't afford the best treatments." "William, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. Not because I owe you, but because it's what I should have been doing all along." I've spent 20 years accumulating wealth without thinking about how it could truly make a difference. William pulled out his phone and showed Marcus something he'd been working on. I've been researching experimental cancer treatments, the ones insurance doesn't cover. Immunotherapy, personalized medicine, clinical trials that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Marcus stared at the screen, seeing numbers that made his head spin. I want to fund that, all of it, for Emma, for other families, for anyone who needs it. William's voice grew stronger. I want to build something that matters, something that would make my children proud when they're old enough to understand. Within a month, the Harrison Chen Foundation for Cancer Research and Treatment was established. William had insisted on including Marcus's name, despite the younger man's protests. The foundation's first act was to cover all of Emma's medical expenses, including access to an experimental treatment that had shown promising results, but cost $300,000. The second was to establish a fund for other families in similar situations. Marcus was overwhelmed. I don't understand why you're doing all this. Because you showed me what it means to be truly wealthy, William replied. Not in money, but in spirit. You gave me your only food when you had every reason to keep it. You opened your home to a stranger. You've dedicated your life to caring for someone else. That's the kind of richness I want to achieve. The foundation grew rapidly. William used his business connections to raise additional funds, but more importantly, he changed how his entire company operated. They began developing technologies specifically for medical applications, partnering with hospitals to reduce healthcare costs. Emma's treatment was progressing wonderfully. The experimental therapy was working better than anyone had hoped. She was gaining weight, her hair was growing back, and most importantly, the cancer markers in her blood were decreasing significantly. The doctors are talking about remission, Marcus told William one evening. Complete remission. William felt a joy he had never experienced in all his years of business success. That's the best news I've heard in, maybe ever. 6 months after that stormy night when they first met, William stood in front of a room full of reporters, announcing a $500 million commitment to cancer research. But what he said at the end of his speech surprised everyone. This foundation exists because of 2 people who taught me the true meaning of wealth. Marcus and Emma Chen showed me that the richest people aren't those with the most money, but those with the biggest hearts. He gestured to the back of the room, where Marcus and Emma sat in the front row. Emma was wearing a beautiful wig, but her eyes were bright and healthy. Marcus gave me a sandwich when I had nothing. It was his only food, and he gave it to a stranger without hesitation. That act of kindness didn't just feed my body, it fed my soul and reminded me what it means to be human. The room erupted in applause, but William wasn't finished. Today, I'm announcing that Marcus Chen will be joining the company as Director of Social Impact. He's going back to school to finish his architecture degree, which the company will fund, and he'll help us design hospitals and treatment centers that prioritize patient dignity and family support. Marcus was speechless. Architecture had been his dream since childhood, put on hold when life demanded sacrifice. Emma Chen will receive a full scholarship to complete law school, with a guaranteed position in our legal department upon graduation, specializing in healthcare advocacy. Emma began to cry, tears of joy and disbelief. 1 year later, William stood in front of the first Harrison Chen Treatment Center, a revolutionary cancer facility designed by Marcus that looked more like a resort than a hospital. Gardens surrounded the building, natural light flooded every room, and families had comfortable spaces to stay together during treatment. You know what's funny? William said to Marcus as they toured the facility on opening day. What's that? I used to think success meant having more than everyone else. Now I realize it means making sure no one has to face their darkest moments alone. Marcus smiled, watching Emma walk through the children's ward in her new role as patient advocate. She was healthy, strong, and using her experience to help other families navigate the complicated world of cancer treatment. Sometimes I think about that night, Marcus said. What would have happened if I had just driven past you? You wouldn't have, William replied confidently. It's not in your nature to ignore someone in need. And you, Do you ever miss the old life? William considered the question seriously. I miss my children. Sarah and I are working on rebuilding our relationship slowly. She's starting to understand that the man who lost everything was more real than the one who had everything. He paused, watching a family walk through the center's doors, hope in their eyes despite their fear. But miss the old life? No. I was successful then, but I wasn't alive. I was so focused on accumulating wealth that I forgot why wealth should matter in the first place. That evening, at the center's opening gala, William was asked to give a speech. The room was filled with donors, medical professionals, and families whose lives had been touched by the foundation. A year ago, William began, I thought I knew what it meant to be successful. I had money, power, a business empire. I thought those things defined me. He looked out at the audience, his eyes finding Marcus and Emma at their table. Then one stormy night I lost everything. Not just my money, but my identity. I found myself sitting on a sidewalk, crying like a child, because I had built my entire life on things that could be taken away in an instant. The room was silent, captivated by his honesty. That's when I met Marcus Chen. He was a delivery driver working 14-hour days to pay for his sister's cancer treatment. He had every reason to ignore a well-dressed stranger having a breakdown on the street. Instead, he stopped. He listened. And then he did something that changed my life forever. William's voice grew emotional. He gave me his only food, a simple peanut butter sandwich that was all he had planned to eat that day. He gave it to someone he had never met, expecting nothing in return. He paused, wiping his eyes. That sandwich was more than food. It was kindness made tangible. It was proof that in a world that often feels cold and selfish, there are still people who choose compassion over self-interest. The audience was moved to tears as William continued. Marcus taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the impact we have on other people's lives. That success isn't about what we accumulate, but about what we give away. He gestured around the beautiful treatment center. This place exists because a young man chose to share his sandwich with a stranger. Every person who receives treatment here, every family that finds hope in these halls, every breakthrough in cancer research that comes from our labs, it all started with one act of kindness. William's voice grew stronger. I challenge everyone in this room to find their sandwich. Find that moment where you can choose between keeping something for yourself or sharing it with someone who needs it more, because that's when you'll discover what you're really made of. 2 years after their first meeting, William received a call that changed everything again. This time, it was good news. Dad? The voice was hesitant, uncertain. Sarah? William's heart leaped. His daughter, now 16, was calling him for the first time in over a year. I've been following the news about your foundation, about the treatment center. Mom showed me the articles. What did you think? William asked, hardly daring to hope. I think I understand now why you changed, why everything had to fall apart before you could build something better. That weekend, Sarah and her younger brother Michael came to visit. William was nervous, unsure how to reconnect with the children who had become strangers. It was Marcus who suggested they all volunteer together at the treatment center. Sometimes the best conversations happen when you're working side by side, he said. Watching his children interact with young cancer patients, seeing their compassion and maturity, William felt a pride he had never experienced during his business victories. Dad, Sarah said that evening as they walked through the center's garden, I'm proud of you. For the first time in my life, I can say that without any reservations. What made the difference? William asked. Before, you were successful. Now, you're significant. There's a difference. 5 years after that fateful stormy night, the Harrison Chen Foundation had funded treatment for over 10,000 cancer patients, built 12 treatment centers across the country, and sponsored breakthrough research that led to 3 new FDA-approved therapies. But more than the numbers, it was the stories that mattered. Families who could focus on healing instead of finances. Children who received cutting-edge treatments regardless of their parents' ability to pay. Researchers who could pursue innovative treatments without worrying about profitability. Emma graduated law school summa cum laude and became the foundation's chief legal counsel. Her first major project was establishing a legal clinic to help families navigate insurance denials and medical bureaucracy. Marcus completed his architecture degree and had designed treatment centers that were being copied around the world. His philosophy was simple: healing environments should nurture the spirit as well as the body. William's company had become a different kind of success story. Profitable, yes, but driven by purpose rather than pure profit. His children were proud to carry on the family name, knowing it represented service rather than just wealth. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, William and Marcus returned to the spot where their paths had first crossed. The bank was still there, and the awning still provided shelter from the rain. "Can I tell you something?" William said as they stood where he had cried 5 years earlier. "Always. That night, when you gave me your sandwich, I was seriously considering ending my life. I had lost everything that I thought mattered, and I couldn't see any reason to go on." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "You never told me that." "Because I was ashamed. But your kindness, your simple act of sharing what little you had, it didn't just feed my body. It reminded me that life has meaning beyond what I had built or lost." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. "You know what's amazing?" Marcus said finally. "What?" "I gave you one sandwich, and you turned it into meals for thousands of people. That's the real miracle, how kindness multiplies when it's shared." William smiled. "You gave me more than food that night. You gave me a purpose worth living for." As they walked away from that corner where their lives had intersected, William felt complete in a way he never had as a wealthy businessman. He had learned that true success wasn't about having everything, but about being everything. Kind, compassionate, generous, and human. The sandwich Marcus had shared wasn't just peanut butter between 2 pieces of bread. It was hope made edible, love made practical, and humanity distilled to its purest essence. And that, William realized, was worth more than all the money in the world. Epilogue, 10 years later. A decade after that stormy night, Dr. Emma Chen stood at the podium of the world's largest oncology conference, announcing a breakthrough treatment that would revolutionize cancer care. The treatment, funded entirely by the Harrison Chen Foundation, would be provided free of charge to patients worldwide. In the audience, William Harrison watched with tears in his eyes. Next to him sat Marcus, now an internationally recognized architect whose healing-centered designs had changed hospital construction standards globally. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma concluded her presentation, "I owe my life to experimental treatment funded by this foundation. But more than that, I owe it to the belief that every person deserves access to hope, regardless of their ability to pay." The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Later, at the conference dinner, a young medical student approached their table. She was nervous, clearly starstruck by the presence of such renowned figures. "Excuse me," she said to William. "I just wanted to thank you. Your foundation funded my mother's treatment 3 years ago. She's cancer-free now." "That's wonderful news," William replied warmly. "But you should thank Marcus here. This all started with his kindness." The student looked confused. "I don't understand." Marcus smiled and pulled a small wrapped sandwich from his jacket pocket. "Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness," he said, offering it to the student. "Have you eaten today?" The young woman accepted the sandwich with trembling hands, suddenly understanding that she was witnessing something profound. "Pay it forward," William added gently. "That's how miracles multiply." As they watched the student walk away, clutching the sandwich like a precious gift, William reflected on the incredible journey that had started with his darkest moment. He had learned that losing everything had been the greatest gift of his life because it had taught him what truly mattered. Success wasn't about accumulation, it was about contribution. Wealth wasn't about what you kept, it was about what you shared. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is offer your only sandwich to someone who needs it more than you do. Because in that moment of pure generosity, you discover that you're never truly poor as long as you're rich in spirit. And that's a wealth that can never be taken away. The end.